It's new radio review time here on Comms by Kemp Outside, and I have another new radio, brand new in the box. It is the Wouxun Q10H, right? I'm super excited about this one. Quad band radio, 6, 2, 1.25, and 70 centimeter bands. Let's get into it. Hey guys, I'm Kevin, and this is Comms by Kemp Outside, where your inside source for outdoor comms, guys. I have been a huge fan of the Wouxun radio brand. When I got back into ham radio, the first HT I bought was an Wouxun KG-UVD1P, right? That's a huge model number. And it's spelled like this, right? W-O-U-X-U-N, but I've been told it's pronounced Wouxun. Right? I don't speak Chinese, so I wouldn't know. Some people call it Wouxun or Wouxun, but Wouxun, I think, is how you're supposed to pronounce it, so that's how I'm going to say it on this channel. But you can argue with me in the comments below. I don't mind. But let's get this thing opened up and check it out, guys. I'm super excited about this radio. And I got this radio from buy2aradios.com. This thing comes with a hefty user's manual, right? And if as a last resort I need to dig into this, I will, but most of the time I don't look at user manuals. There's tutorials online, and quite frankly, I've used so many handheld radios over time, I kind of just know what I'm doing most of the time. But I'm sure there's some good information in there. It does come with a battery cradle, and unlike a lot of the battery cradles I've seen lately, it is not a USB-C cradle, right? So I'm sure there's a power supply, and indeed there is right here for the charging cradle. All right, so pull that out, and then there is the power supply. Now, I just recently reviewed the KG-935H, right, which is a tri-band radio, 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters. In fact, that radio is sitting right here, right? And it takes a different charger, battery charger, but it also takes a different charging cable. Look, this is for the KG-935, and this is for the KG-Q10H. Why can't they make these things standard, right? Because, I mean, these things look very similar, right? But when I'm going to find these, especially if you've got a lot of radios, why can't they be standard, right? So that just ticks me off. I mean, these are brand new radios from Wouxun. Why can't they why can't they take a standard charging cradle, or at least the power supply for this charging cradle be standard, right? That just, I don't know. To me, that's stupid. But anyway, I'll get off that soapbox. It does come with a battery, right? And so here is the battery. Now, one of the things that I noticed about this battery right away is that the battery is not USB-C chargeable, which I love it when batteries are USB-C chargeable. So I'm not crazy about this. Now, I think the radio is USB-C chargeable, and we'll get to that when we get to the radio review, but I like to have batteries that are USB-C rechargeable so that if I just want to charge the battery, I can plug the battery in. Especially if I have extra batteries, I don't need to use the radio to charge the battery. So that is a downside. This battery is 7.4 volts at 3,000 milliamp hours for 22.2 watt hours. Now, the other thing is this battery is not interchangeable with the battery on the 935H. Again, why don't radio companies make interchangeable batteries? Well, it's a conspiracy to get us to buy more batteries. I'm convinced of it. Thing comes with a belt clip, and the belt clip goes on the radio itself, which is good. And then it comes with a wrist strap, which I like. And it looks like it comes with some screws for the belt clip. This radio comes with 2 antennas, right? So it has one that is longer and one that is shorter, right? I'm guessing the shorter one is for 136 to 174 megahertz and 400 to 520. So this is your 2 meter and 70 centimeter antenna. And then this one is for 50 to 54 megahertz and 220 to 225 megahertz. So this one is for your 6 meters and your 1.25 meter band. And I'm guessing that doesn't work too well on 6 meters. Just saying. If you want to use a handheld on 6 meters, you probably ought to figure out a different antenna option. Just saying. But we'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. This is the only 6 meter radio I have, so I don't know how well I'm going to be able to test 6 meters. Hopefully I can find someone else who's got 6 meters and we can talk. And then here is the battery of the radio. Now this radio comes in a variety of colors, and so I went with the green, specifically because in handhelds, I believe that if you can make it high vis, have it be high vis, that way if you drop it when you're out on the trail, when you're hiking, whenever, whatever, you can go back and find it, right? When these things are black, like the KG 935H, which I didn't have an option to get this in any other color, right? If I drop this, hopefully I can find it, but you know, it's hard to find black radios on the ground. When you got something that's got some color on it, it helps to find it. So let's get this thing on here. Let's go ahead and put the battery on the radio. All right. And we'll go ahead and screw the 2 meter 440 antenna in. All right, so just looking at this radio, it's a nice little radio, comfortable in the hand. It's got, looks like it's got 2 PTTs, one for the top band and one for the bottom band, and then 2 programmable buttons on the side. Has an access port right here. I don't know what that's about. We'll find out. Here is the access port for USB-C on the other side, right? I think that charges and programs, but we're going to find out too. And then right here you have a panel for a speaker mic that you have to unscrew, and it's got 2 screws in it instead of 1. Up top, you've got 2 knobs on the same shaft, right? So you've got the top knob, looks like volume on off, right? And then the second knob is a channel or VFO changer. So it looks like it's got some frequencies already programmed in, but we're going to take a look at that when we go to program the radio. Basically what I want to do, guys, is I want to go ahead and program some frequencies in here, and then we're going to put it on a power meter. We're going to test it for spurious emissions. I know other people have done that, but I like to do it as well, just to make sure that what they're shipping today is the same that they were shipping 6 months ago or a year ago, right? Sometimes things change. We want to make sure that companies are still shipping quality radios, so we're going to do that. So stay tuned. I got some work to do, and then we'll be back. All right, guys, let's test some power and some spurious emissions. But first, my favorite part. Oh, yeah. All right, so there are 4 power levels. So we're going to do 4 power levels times 4 bands for 16 tests, starting on 6 meters, right, using my Surecom HF power meter. So as you can see, on ultra high power, we're transmitting 4.29 watts. All right, so we're going to change that.
Transmit power.
Go to high.
Enter.
All right, and on high, you can see the H on the screen. 3.26 watts on high. All right.
Menu. Transmit power. Enter.
All right, going to mid. All right, we can see the little M on the screen. On mid power, we're getting 2.11 watts on mid power. All right, and going to low.
Transmit power. Enter.
All right, so we can see the little L on there for low, and that is 0.85 watts on low. Okay, that's 6 meters. I got to switch over to my VHF UHF meter to do 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters. All right, guys, so now we are on the 2 meter calling frequency on extra high power or ultra high. Here we go. ultra high, we're getting 4.43 watts out of ultra high.
Menu. Transmit power.
Going to high power.
Enter.
All right, we can see the little H there. And we are at 4.25, 4.23 watts on high power.
Menu. Transmit power.
Going to mid.
Enter.
All right, the little M on the screen. 3.1 watts on mid.
Menu. Transmit power.
All right, going to
Enter.
low. I have the little L on the screen there. And 1.1 watts. All right, let's go to 220.
191.
Let's see.
2, 3.
All right, so on 220, right, we're on ultra high power. On ultra high power on 220, we're getting 3.2 watts. All right.
Menu. Transmit power.
Going to high.
Enter.
All right, on high power, we see the H there. 3.2 watts on high, 3.19. All right.
Menu. Transmit power.
Going to mid.
Enter.
See the little M on the screen there. Mid power, we get 1.46 watts on mid. All right, let's go to low.
Menu. Transmit power. Enter.
All right, we are now on low as indicated by the little L. And with low, we get a measly 0.2. We'll give it the benefit of the doubt. It keeps going up. 0.25 watts. 0.25 watts on low. All right, gonna go to 70 centimeters here.
2.
All right, on 70 centimeters, we're on extra high power. Here we go. And on extra high power on 70 centimeters, we're getting 5.55 watts. All right.
Menu. Transmit power.
Going to high.
Enter.
All right, we can see the little H there on high. 3.96 watts on high.
Menu. Transmit power.
Going to mid.
Enter.
All right, the little M on the screen indicates mid. And we're getting 2.09 watts on mid. All right, and last one, we're gonna go to low.
Transmit power. Enter.
All right, the little L indicates low on 70 centimeters, and we get 0.81 watts on low. All right, that is the transmit power on the Wouxun Q10H. Now on to Spurious emissions. All right, guys, so what we've got here is we've got the radio set up on 2 meters on ultra high. And then let me just see if I can slide this into the screen. I've got a 40 dB 10 watt attenuator here. And then this is a 10 dB attenuator. So 50 dB of attenuation is what we're going for. And that should give me at least 10 dB of attenuation in the Tiny SA. So let's get the Tiny SA set up. And how we do this is we go to Measure, Harmonic. I'm going to test on 146.52 megahertz. We're going to leave our span at 10. All right, and then we're going to do, let's see, level. And we're going to do exterior gain. And we're at negative 50 times 1, right? And then we're going to do, let's see, back. We're going to do display, draw line, negative 16.02 times 1. And that gives us our line for 25 microwatts. Okay, so here we go. We're going to give this a shot and see what happens here. So as we press the PTT, we want to see all spurs be at least 40 dB below the fundamental and below the blue line. As you can see, this is a clean transmitter on high power. And we are getting, looks like 16 dB of internal attenuation. So I'm pretty happy with that. But what I'm going to do though is I'm going to add 6 dB of attenuation and see if that changes. So what we're going to do here, we're just going to unscrew this. And we're going to add a 6 dB attenuator. Okay, so now that we've added 6 dB of attenuation, let's go ahead and change our level to -56, right? Because we added 6 dB of attenuation. Let's try it again. So here we go. And as we pull the trigger, we can still see no spurs, and it's saying the internal attenuation is 14 dB of attenuation. That's interesting. I would have expected it to go to 10, but I'm gonna let the Tiny SA do what it wants to do, but I think that is a clean radio. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and change the transmit power to high power.
Transmit power.
All right, and then,
Enter.
all right, we're on high power now. We're gonna do another test. And on high power, we see we're still at 13 dB of internal attenuation on the Tiny SA and a clean radio. All right, let's just go down to the next power level.
Transmit power.
All right, we're on mid now. And here we go on mid. On mid power, we're seeing 12 dB of attenuation in the Tiny SA and a clean transmit. And I'm going to drop down to low just to see. We might have too much attenuation, but we're going to find out.
Transmit power. Enter.
All right, so we're on low power. And on low power, it looks like the Tiny SA is giving us 6 dB of attenuation, but that second spur there is nothing to worry about. I would say that this is a clean radio on 2 meters. I'm gonna get things changed over to 1.25 meters and we'll do that test. So give me just a second. All right, guys, so we have the Tiny SA set up for 220 megahertz. Actually, it's 223.5. The calling frequency on 1.25 meters. We're on extra high power, which was only 3.2 watts. So here we go. And transmitting on the Tiny SA, we can see that we are a clean radio and we're getting about 12 dB of attenuation. So that is a good test. All right, let's go to
Menu. Transmit power.
high power on here.
Enter.
All right, so on high power, this was about the same 3.19 watts. And the Tiny SA is showing an internal attenuation of 14 dB and a clean transmitter.
Menu. Transmit power. Enter.
All right, mid power. Mid power, we were only transmitting 1.46 watts. So we'll see how we do here. We're getting internal attenuation of 6 dB. So it's a little bit lower than I want, but I'm pretty happy with that result. I think that's clean. And then I'm gonna go ahead and go to low power. And this was a measly 0.25 watts, right? So
Enter.
I might have to switch out attenuators on this, but we'll see. So here we go. So I'm getting 0 dB of attenuation internally, but it's showing a clean radio. I'm not going to bother with it. Oh, actually, it's showing 6 dB of attenuation, not 0. My eyes must be getting old. But anyway, clean radio on 220. Let me get everything switched out, and we're going to test for 6 meters. Oh, by the way, the attenuation setup on this was a 40 dB attenuator and then a 10 and a 3. So for 53 dB total attenuation. I'm going to get it switched over for 6 meters, and we'll do that test. I'm not going to test 70 centimeters because there is no FCC requirement for the 70 centimeter band in spurious emissions. All right, guys, we are set up for 6 meters now. We're on ultra high power, which was 4.29 watts. We have the Tiny SA set up. And so here we go. So as we can see, we're getting 12 dB of internal attenuation. And we do have a second harmonic, which is interesting. It is 50.2 dBc. So that's, 50 dB below the fundamental, but it is above that blue line. So that is a little bit disturbing. It's really, really close. I'd love to put this on a better spectrum analyzer, but I'm somewhat concerned about that, right? That's not what I wanted to see. Let's go ahead and go to high power.
Menu. Transmit power. Enter.
All right, so here's high power. High power now only has 7 dB of attenuation, and that spur is a little bit closer. 4 is a little higher. Let me go ahead and change out the attenuation here just a little bit to get a little bit more. Actually, no, it's reading 13 dB of attenuation in the Tiny SA. So I'm going to say that's the results. That little second harmonic is really close. It's 50 dB down. It's really close, guys, really close.
Menu. Transmit power.
All right, going to mid power here.
Enter.
And on mid power, we were transmitting 2.11 watts. So here we go. So we have 7 dB of internal attenuation now, and that 2 and 4 are real close to the line, but look like they're under. All right, I'm going to go down to low power just to see.
Menu. Transmit power. Enter.
All right, so 6 meters on low. Here we go. So we're getting 6 dB of internal attenuation. That second harmonic is below the line. The fourth harmonic is below the line. So the only question I really have is on ultra high and high power. How clean is this really on 6 meters? It was close, guys. I'm a little concerned, but until I can get this on a much more expensive lab grade piece of test equipment, I'm gonna have to say, I don't know, I have concerns. All right, those were the spurious emissions test results. Well, there you have it, guys, the power and spurious emissions test for the Wouxun Q10H. All in all, I like the radio, but there are definitely some things that I am concerned about. Number one is that spurious emission on 6 meters. Like I said, it's really, really close. It's within the error rate probably of my testing equipment, right? I don't exactly know how well these little attenuators work. I actually, guys, as of the making of this video, I have a nano VNA on order. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure all of my attenuators to see if they really are what they say they are, right? Because I'm just assuming that they are because I don't have the equipment to test them, but I will. Admittedly, right, it's a nano VNA, right? So it's the same quality as the Tiny SA, right? This is not a $40,000 spectrum analyzer. It's a $100 spectrum analyzer or $120 or, whatever the Tiny SA Ultra is going for these days. But it gets us close, right? And it's close enough to me that this is probably an okay radio, right? It's probably my testing methodology or something like that that is causing that spur to be so close. But maybe not. Maybe this radio is technically not meeting the FCC standard. You know, they do have a testing booth at Hamcation. I think the ARRL puts it on, and I'll take this over there and see if they'll test it on 6 meters for me to see what they say. But in general, guys, I think that this radio is going to be fine. The biggest thing is that the antenna that comes with it, I think, is going to be woefully inadequate for 6 meters anyway. Right, so the chances of really transmitting spurious emissions that are harmful is probably pretty low, right? But that's not an excuse, right? I know that there's going to be people out there who don't like me saying that, but I'm definitely all about the practical as well as the theoretical, right? You know, what is this practically hurting versus theoretically hurting? And then, you know, the other thing is, guys, is I don't know how much I'm going to even use this radio on 6 meters. I think what I want to do is Faraday makes a roll-up J-pole for 6 meters, and I think I would like to get my hands on that antenna and try, you know, 6 meter FM field operations on this radio by hanging a Faraday in a tree. There aren't a whole lot of 6 meter antenna options out there, so especially for HTs, and especially for HTs with this antenna connection, right? A lot of them you would have to convert over to you know, a different SMA format to use the I think there's a diamond antenna that's out there for that, right? The other thing is, guys, is, you know, it ships with 2 antennas, and By Two-Way Radios sells the 935H, and that radio has a tri-band antenna from Wouxun that is a pretty cool antenna. Unfortunately, if you saw my other video, I sent that radio back because it did not pass my spurious emissions testing. So I sent that radio back, but the next order I put into By Two-Way Radios, I'm going to order one of those Wouxun tri-band antennas for this radio, so at least I have the ability to operate 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters on this radio at all times, and then just worry about, you know, 6 meters later if I intend to use that band. I don't have any other radios that transmit on 6 meters, so I don't even have a way to test 6 meters on this radio, really. So, you know, maybe I can get into that a little bit later. You know, Wouxun also sells a dual band radio. It's one of their older versions, but it's 6 meters and 2 meters, right? And I think it only has like 199 memory channels, and it's very similar to the old KG UVD-1P, which was my first Wouxun radio. And I'm interested in maybe picking up one of those so that I can have 2 radios that operate on 6 meters, but we'll see how that goes. Maybe I'll end up with one and do a review here on the channel and test out some 6 meter stuff. The other bummer is that Faraday 6 meter antenna is not inexpensive, right? And I don't know if that's a good use of my dollars because I don't know how often I'm going to use 6 meters. So it's a novelty. It's nice. I can definitely at least receive on 6 meters, listen for traffic on 6 meters, and then if I, you know, hear a bunch of stuff, then maybe I'll engage and then get the equipment to do 6 meters. The other thing that I'm really disappointed about this radio on, guys, is the transmit power for the 1.25 meter band. Oftentimes, when you see radios on the market and they include the 1.25 meter band, they just kind of treat it as an afterthought, right? They always have lower power levels, you know, especially in the mobile radios out there. Most of the mobile radios that are out there, if they have the 1.25 meter band, it's a much lower power level, which is an absolute bummer, which is why I like the Anytone 5888 UV3, which I have in the Kemp bus. So that one I think puts out 25 watts on 1.25 meters. So it's not a full 50 watts, but it's a whole lot better than the 5 watts that a lot of other radios only put out. So I'm disappointed in that too. I am really a big fan of the 1.25 meter band. You want me to buy a radio, include 1.25 meter capabilities, and I'm all about it. And the whole reason is, guys, is because if we don't use the frequency allocation we have, we're going to lose it, right? And if more hams aren't on the 1.25 meter band, we're going to lose it, right? And there's a lot of times when my son and I are the only ones on 1.25 meters. I even listen to 1.25 meters when I'm at places like Hamcation, and it's, you know, compared to VHF, UHF, you know, 2 meters, 70 centimeters, that band is a ghost town, right? So I really like the 1.25 meter band, and I highly recommend people jump on that and buy radios that have that capability. So if Wouxun was going to come out with a Gen 2 of this radio, and I don't know that they are, right? Nobody asks me what they ought to do. But if they were to come out with a Gen 2 of this radio, I would say absolutely make sure 6 meters is clean, and then make sure that the 1.25 meter band isn't an afterthought and that it has the same transmit power as the rest of this radio. The other thing I would say, guys, is there's no need for 4 power levels, right? The difference between ultra high and high in a lot of these were only, you know, a watt at most, but most of the time less than, you know, a quarter of a watt, right? So, you know, really, the power levels were kind of all over the place in the testing, and that's always disappointing to me. Like, if you're going to do, you know, mid power levels, maybe do, you know, 5 watts, 2 watts, half a watt or something like that. But, you know, they were all over the place on these bands. So it really doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So it's not a feature, right? It's not, having 4 power levels is not a feature of this radio. It's really kind of more cumbersome, you know, probably with a 5 watt maximum, which we got 5.55 watts on 70 centimeters was the highest we got. Even on 2 meters, it was only 4.43, right? So it's kind of anemic in its power. And does that really matter? Probably not, right? Your line of sight, your elevation, the antenna that you use is going to be a whole lot more important than, you know, does it transmit an extra watt or 2? It's going to be much more important to have a better antenna and higher elevation. But I have a tendency to like higher power radios. I like radios that put out 7 or 8 watts. I really like radios that have a 10 watt option, you know, just to make sure that you're putting out as much power as possible. So the power levels are a little random and anemic on this radio. So, you know, take that for what it's worth. I have a lot more to say about this radio, but I really want to get into programming and charging, and I want to test its waterproof rating, right? Because this radio is IP67, which means it can be submerged. So we're going to test that. We're going to do the same thing with this one we did with the VGC VRN76. I'm going to go ahead and dunk it in a cooler and see if it still works after that. We'll do a test of that. So be sure to stay tuned for that. But the last thing I want to do is I just want to cover over the frequencies it covers, and then we'll stop this video because this video is getting long, and then we'll do a part 2 where we do some more testing, some audio testing, transmission testing, and stuff like that. So let's talk about what this thing receives, because it is a whole bunch. So they advertise this radio as a quad bander with super heterodyne receivers capable of transmitting on the 1.25 meter, 2 meter, 6 meter, and 70 centimeter ham bands, right? So those are the transmits. The receive says it's a wide spectrum of other bands, including 50 to 54 megahertz, that's 6 meters, 108 to 174 megahertz, 220 to 225 megahertz, 320 to 480 megahertz, and 895 to 999 megahertz. It can receive airband frequencies in AM mode. So this is really interesting, but you know, they have a GMRS version of this radio called the Q10H, and I want to get my hands on that radio. I'm hoping to acquire one of those just because I want to test it. But what's interesting about that radio is that radio receives CB. Right? It doesn't transmit on CB, but it receives CB frequencies. And so I'm kind of thinking that if you can program this radio to receive CB, right, why can't you receive, you know, listen in on 10 meters on this radio, right? I think that would be really cool to have 10 meter receive on the ham radio. 6 meter receive and transmit is cool, but add 10 meter receive, that would be really cool, right? So I'm kind of bummed that the Q10G has 11 meter, CB receive, but the ham version doesn't have 10 meter FM receive. So kind of a bummer, or 10 meter, it'd even be even cooler if it could receive 10 meter sideband. That would be sweet. But anyway, just something to consider. There are some other unique features like the two PTTs, right? The bottom PTT is PTT1 and the top one is PTT2, which means this is the primary PTT. Whatever is selected on the screen, the primary PTT will transmit on that, and then the top PTT will transmit on the other one. I really wish that it was top and bottom, right? The top PTT operates the top frequency and the bottom PTT operates the bottom frequency. I think you can change that in the programming, and that's how I'm going to change it if I'm able to do that, because it is a little confusing, especially compared to other dual PTT radios. So I'm going to see if I can get into that, but we're going to do a video on programming and how to use the radio, some of the other features. I think this thing has crossband repeat. We're going to test some of that, trying out the crossband repeater. We're going to see if we can crossband at least the 3 bands that I can test, right? I can't test 6 meters. I don't have a second 6 meter radio, but we can at least test crossband between 2 meters, 1.25 meters, and 70 centimeters. So we're going to do that. And we're also going to do some more general discussion on the radio itself. So be sure to stay tuned for part 2. I'm not exactly sure when that video is going to come out. I have a backlog of stuff to do. One of the awesome things about doing a comms channel, guys, is there's always something to talk about. And I have so many topics I want to shoot and get out there. So I know I have part 2s that need to come out on the TID Radio TDH3 Plus. I need a part 2 on the Baofeng EV5R Mini. I need a part 2 on the KG Q10H. I've just got so much to do, guys, and so I'm trying my hardest to get it out to you as fast as possible. So if you enjoy the content, give me a thumbs up, hit subscribe, ring that little bell icon that notifies you when we release new videos, as it seriously helps me grow this channel. This is not my full-time job, guys, so I'm trying to squeeze this in with all the other stuff that I'm doing. So, but I'm trying to grow so that this can be more of a day job. And when that's the case, then I can get this content out faster. So guys, anything you can do to share the channel would be greatly appreciated. If you have the KG Q10H and you want to share your thoughts, drop some in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions about this radio, drop some in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And guys, I'm thinking about doing a monthly video series called the Monthly Mailbag, where I take any questions that are submitted either in the comments section or via email. And you can always email me at info@kempoutside.com. And I'm thinking about creating a monthly mailbag video where I just answer your questions. So if you like that idea, tell me that in the comments below whether you like that idea as well. Guys, this video is going on way too long. Thanks for watching. Connect with us on our other social media. I'm Kevin, and this is Comms by Kemp Outside. We're your inside source for outdoor comms. We'll see you outside.